Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Antiplian, for being here. I'm just going to do a quick introduction from some things that I've found on the website, and then a little bit about what HireClout is for people who may not know. So first of all, Vitas Antiplian has served as the CEO of HireClout since he co-founded the company in 2014. He's an award-winning CEO with over 15 years of experience in tech and recruiting. At HireClout, he oversees daily operations while focusing on everything tech-related, as well as placing executives. Additionally, he's a board member to many startups, an investor, and an entrepreneur. And for those of you who don't know, HireClout is a premier technology recruiting and consulting firm, and they're focused on building relationships that deliver results. They're a national firm with global teams to support their efforts and give the best to candidates and clients. Their passion for elevating careers and companies have led them to fill positions at companies such as Sony, Hulu, Uber, Tinder, and many more companies, from startups to Fortune 500 companies. Thank you, Mr. Antiplian, for joining us.
Thank you, David. That was an excellent introduction, by the way. One of the best I've ever heard. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That was great. Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here. I've been really impressed with David and his mission, and now I've met Steven, but I'm very, very impressed with what you guys are trying to accomplish. And I told David, if they're interns like you or people like you, we could hire all of them, right? So young people that actually want to succeed and work are very uncommon. So it gives those of you that do want to win and are willing to sacrifice a big advantage. So happy to be here and help out however I can.
Thank you so much. So the first question is really broad, but when you first look at a resume or analyze a resume, what do you look for in particular?
When we're hiring for our clients, David, it's a completely different thing. So I'll take that kind of off the table a little bit, because we're looking for technical skills, right? We're hiring technology executives. So in that case, we're looking for very specific skill sets. Mm-hmm. But overall, when I'm hiring for, let's say, HireClout, and depending on the position, typically we're, believe it or not, less focused on the resume, more focused on the individual and the effort that they put out to get to us, right? So, but overall, what I look for resumes that are clear, concise, and accomplishment based. Especially this early in your career, you should have no more than one page. As you get older and more mature and have a lot more experience, then of course, you're welcome to have a second page or even a third, right? Some of the executives that try to put it all in one page typically doesn't look as good because you're not sure what they actually did. But rather than focusing on functional tasks that you do at a job, I would focus on accomplishments. If it's possible. If you were a barista, it's going to be a little bit tougher to talk about accomplishments at Starbucks. However, you can still focus on the customer experience, that you provided while you were a barista, right? Maybe customer retention, maybe talking about things that are still other businesses could care about. So you try to tailor your resume based on what you think the employee cares about. They're not necessarily caring about your need for work-life balance. They care about their job getting done in a great way and their customers being taken care of. So I would focus on accomplishments. I would keep it clear, concise, and I would talk about things you're proud of accomplishing, even if it's not a professional job. And let's say it's a personal project, try to make it relevant to whatever job that you are applying for.
And I'm going to jump to one of the audience questions. Thank you so much. Real quick, should people, high school students, should they include school achievements, whether that's GPA or things along those lines?
Absolutely. Especially if that's all you have. Mm-hmm. If it's impressive, then put it on there. If your GPA is, let's say, a 2.9, by the way, nothing wrong with a 2.9 GPA, but I wouldn't put it there. If it's not impressive, I would leave it out. I would say typically there is no science to it, but maybe, something impressive could be a 3.4, 3.5. And if it's a very, very challenging curriculum or challenging school, and it's a 3.3, put it on there, right? For example, Berkeley is known to not give out really good grades. So someone with a 2.9 GPA there is relatively, impressive. So I wouldn't mind putting it there if they're a Berkeley grad or Stanford or something like that. But if we're talking about high school, definitely 3.5 and above. And don't focus just on grades. Focus on extracurricular activities. If you are a captain on a sports team, that's great. If you're in some kind of comedy club or some kind of leadership club, absolutely put it on there, because all that tells me is that you're disciplined enough to do it, to stick with it, and that you took a leadership position, and you did things that were uncomfortable. For example, my daughter's in leadership clubs, and I realized how much she sacrifices to be part of it. So that tells me she's dedicated, right? She's not just about the easiest route. So absolutely, I would put that. Sports, theater, anything in any kind of club that you're doing in and outside of school that matters, especially if it's relevant.
Got it. Thank you. And you mentioned conveying your strengths, but how can candidates effectively convey their strengths and their dedication in resumes?
I would focus on things that matter to organizations. For example, if you tell me that you worked at Home Depot and you were let's say a clerk, right? You were a cashier. That's not as relevant to any of my jobs that I would ever care about, right? Unless it's another cashier position. But what I care about is things like, on time 100% of the time, right? A commitment award at your school or at your organization. You grew, you were promoted. You originally started as a bagger, then you became a cashier, and now you're a supervisor. All of that tells me you care about growth, you care about winning, you care about doing a good job, and someone is recognizing that outside of you and your parents. Someone is recognizing that they appreciate your hard work, and that means a lot.
Got it. And do you have any specific tips or advice for someone who may be looking for positions in the technology industry? Like, how would you tailor maybe a Home Depot experience, like you mentioned, to technology and to that industry?
Tech is challenging to get into in the position specifically you all are in, right? So what I would focus on is I would focus on education to get you the skills you need. So let's say you graduate from high school and you don't want to go and do the 4-year track. A lot of people are choosing not to do that, although I highly recommend going and studying computer science or computer engineering or electrical engineering even. I would highly recommend going that route. But if for some reason you don't have that opportunity or you can't, what I would do is I would go to a boot camp and I would do personal projects and I would go and get internships where I would get an opportunity to do that job. Don't focus on money necessarily. If you need to, give away your skills so you can learn and you can apply those skills and put something on a resume that's real, right? And you're welcome to mention it was an unpaid internship or it was a voluntary positions. I would never recommend boasting or faking kind of what you did, but definitely try to go out and get that experience or go to a boot camp, because as a part of a boot camp, you actually get that opportunity to work on projects. And if you have a cousin that owns a restaurant, hey, let me build you a website. That's a good opportunity as well.
And I know you're so closely connected with the technology industry. Are there any boot camps or programs that you would recommend?
There are many. I've even spoken to some. I could actually look it up for you, and it'll immediately kind of spring some ideas. Coding Dojo is a good one that I'm aware of. UCLA has a really good program. If you want to look into that. Yes, it's UCLA Extension. We talked about Coding Dojo. There's Sabio, Sabio. There's Codesmith. And the most popular, I believe, is General Assembly. All of those are great organizations. Years ago, they didn't get the kind of respect that they're getting now. Before, typically, they would get ignored and people would say, no, I really need someone with a traditional experience or traditional computer science experience. However, there is such a, how do I say this, shortage in great talent that companies are now willing to look at junior talent, and they're even willing to look at folks that have graduated from a boot camp in a junior position or a paid internship to start.
And I think that brings us to another one of the questions from people who are submitting questions. What entry-level positions are there in the technology industry with opportunities to move up or to gain really powerful experience? If someone maybe doesn't want to answer phones, but they're willing to do some of the more nitty-gritty, but that with a purpose of climbing the ladder.
Great question. The key here is tech companies or tech type of positions. Because they're two separate things. If you want to work for a tech company, well, then you've got to really think about what are all of the positions they have open and what's the one you have the most experience in or interest in to get your foot in the door. Because if you, for example, let's say you want to be a marketing associate. Yeah, you want to be a marketing manager at a good tech company, but you can't get in there because you don't have enough marketing experience. Well, find a position that you do have some experience in and start there. If you could prove yourself to be a great character and work really hard, there's a chance that you would get those opportunities before an outsider would. There's also a possibility you wouldn't, but at least you've already worked at the company, you've proven yourself, you've done a great job. For example, if actually this is a real example, we've had admin folks that have asked to become recruiters at HIRECLOUT, right? And sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. We have a admin assistant, executive assistant right now who wants to do more marketing, and she's phenomenal. So if anyone can grow into that position slowly, would be her, because I already know her character. I know her work ethics. I know her as a person. So why wouldn't I give her an opportunity to learn? I would even pay for her to get classes. In fact, she's doing that. And I would allow her to learn on the job a little bit and experiment on small scale projects, and then eventually move into a role like that. That's one side of their house. If you're talking about from a technical perspective, a lot tougher. But what I would go into is if you want to be a software developer, but you're not ready, a QA position could be a good way into software development. I don't know if you guys know what QA engineers do, but basically rather than writing code, a lot of times they're testing the code. So that's a really good opportunity to get in there and do manual QA and then learn automation, which is scripting and coding, and then eventually become a full-grown programmer. But again, you will have to have some technical skills to become a QA engineer or QA analyst. There's other ways. You can become a business analyst and then grow into that. You can get a junior scrum master position, a junior project manager position. The key is getting your foot in the door at a great company who will allow you to learn and grow with them.
Now, let's say I find a position in a company I love, but I want to pursue a higher position. Now, this is not really necessarily technology based, but as a leader yourself, how can I distinguish myself or make myself known apart from the resume?
So you want to work for a specific company. You have your eyes set on, let's say, give me an example. Apple, Google, give me like one example.
Sure, Apple.
You want to work for Apple, and what do you want to do? You want to specifically work in a specific position or just Google itself?
I think you would be more distinguishing yourself as an employee. So however the individual wants to grow, I don't think it's necessarily a particular position.
The one big giant myth that you'll hear people talk about a lot, especially young people, they'll say, I want to get into a big company so that I can grow. I believe that's a myth, and I've seen it historically as a myth, because the idea is, oh, it's a big company and therefore there's lots of opportunities. Yes and no. A lot of times those companies have a lot of silos, a lot of different silos, and whatever you're hired for typically is a career you'd have. And it's a little bit more difficult to be seen, right? The big decision makers are going to be more difficult to attain as let's see how David's done. How does a very high level person at Google know how Stephen or David have done? They're not going to know, right? So above you will be some senior team lead. Above them will be some kind of manager. Above them will be a senior manager. Above them will be a director and a senior director and a VP that all roll up into a higher level group that rolls up to. And so it's challenging. And a lot of times, if you entered there as whatever the position is, their focus is grooming you within that organization rather than you trying to sprout into different groups. These are general statements, by the way. There's big companies that are phenomenal at grooming people. At a smaller company, I think as long as your expectations are reasonable, I would say that right in the beginning. Hey, I'm applying for this position. I'm really excited about being an admin assistant. But to be honest with you, I'm really long-term goals is to get into marketing. I'm willing to wait a year or two. I'm willing to work really hard on becoming a phenomenal admin assistant. But long-term goals is this. Is there an opportunity at your organization to achieve this? Because they might be thinking a lot of things. They might be thinking, yes, in fact, David, we have a position. Why don't we have you go and interview for that group because we actually need a junior marketing person. So why even become an admin person? That's one route. Or second route is, yes, Stephen, that's a possibility. We could eventually get you there, but just know there's no promises and it could take a year or two, sure. Or they can say, no, David, typically when we hire someone, that's their focus. There really isn't too much cross promotional opportunities. And then you can make a decision. Do I want to work for this company who is blatantly saying that there's probably no opportunities to move up or sideways? And that might be great. That might be something you do for a year or two and do your best and learn a lot and move on. Or do you want to continue pursuing other opportunities that are organizations that are openly saying, absolutely, in fact, it's something we prefer to do, is bring people in at the lower level and groom them up, right? So typically my recruiters, they come in as recruiting coordinators, typically a year, 2 or 3 out of college. They learn the business at the very, kind of basic level, and then they are groomed to become recruiting associates, technical recruiters, client success managers, leads managers, so on and so forth. But that's all within that realm. Cross-department promotional opportunities are a little bit more challenging because that hiring manager might have no interest in moving you to a different group because he or she might need work done. Hopefully I was able to answer that question.
So you mentioned just talking to companies. Another audience question: is there any etiquette you would recommend, or anything you would recommend to impress people when you're speaking to them in person in a job interview for the first time?
Basic stuff like do what you said you would do. So if you set up an interview on Wednesday at 4 p.m., you better show up and you better be on time, if not early. Don't be ridiculously early, right? So if you have a 4 o'clock in person, showing up at 3:30 is a little awkward, right? Because they sometimes don't know what to do with you. They feel uncomfortable. But I'd recommend at least 15 minutes. If it's a Zoom or a phone conversation, just be prepared 10 minutes before. Do a lot of research. Don't just show up and like, oh, what is this position again? Oh, what does your company do? Because that shows lack of interest, and it shows that you're just kind of in for the ride and you're just looking for the first company to hire you so you can take it, versus here's the research that I've done. Here's what I've learned about your company. Here's what I like about your company. Here's why I'm actually interested, and here's why I think I'm a great fit. That to me is impressive. If you're no longer interested in that job, make sure you send a thank you note afterwards, whether you're interested or not. But if you want to pull out, don't just disappear and ghost companies. This is, again, a new thing that I've seen. Young people that don't need something anymore are just disappearing because they can. Definitely not the right thing to do. You always want to send a thank you note. Really enjoyed the interview. Here's what I liked about the interview. Don't just be dry and thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time. Really enjoyed meeting Stephen and David. I felt that their passion for the company, what they're trying to accomplish, is right aligned with my professional goals, and I would love the opportunity to continue interviewing. I'd love the opportunity to work for your organization. What are the next steps? Ask for, I don't know if you've ever heard of CTAs in marketing. They call it a call to action. Typically, you'll see buttons on websites that says buy now or learn more. Your emails need to have a CTA. Don't just leave it alone. Like an FYI email, like, thank you, Stephen, for taking the time to interview with me. I enjoyed it. Great. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. There's nothing there, right? So if I see a question for Stephen, hey, when will I hear back from your organization? How did it go on your end? Did you feel that I was a good fit for your position? Now forces me to answer that question. If I'm a professional, my duty, my courtesy to Stephen, who took 2-3 hours of his time, the least I can do is provide feedback. Tell him he's in. There will be a next step. He'll hear from us in 2 weeks. He is out, and maybe some feedback. Hey, David, really enjoy meeting you. I think you've got a bright future. However, I don't think you're a perfect fit for this position at this time, and here's all the reasons why. So those are some things I would highly recommend doing.
Got it. I think that's very interesting, especially in the age of, texting and social media. I think people sometimes do lack that etiquette that you mentioned, responding to emails promptly, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So circling back to resumes, Do you have any advice? This is what actually one of your questions for someone who finds someone being ignored because their resumes aren't anchored down by experience. Is there a way to call attention to a company, or is it just a matter of waiting it out and submitting a lot of resumes?
Another phenomenal question. It really depends how badly you want that position and
Mm-hmm.
how badly you want to stand out. If you do what everybody's doing, you should expect what everybody's getting, which is either ignored or they're only picking the ones with the most experience. So if you really want that position, what I would do is I would do more than the average person is doing. So, in a digital age, it's changed. But if you're clicking one button to apply for a position, maybe you do a little more, right? Maybe you find the hiring manager's name, find his or her email address, and send them a note. Hey, I applied for this position. Here's a link. Really like the company in this role. I think it's a great fit. Here's my resume. Are you the hiring manager for this role? If so, I would love the opportunity to speak to you. If not, can you please forward this to whoever is the hiring manager? That's one way in a digital era to stand out. Second one is cold calling someone. What made David stand out is he just called me. He called me and I'm like, who is this? I don't even know. He's very well spoken. He had done his research. I almost couldn't say no. It was too professional and too impressive for me to just ignore. And that's common, right? There's universities that send very basic emails and never follow up. And I don't send them an email back because again, I'm busy. I don't have much to gain. Instead I'm giving back, right? So if I'm going to give back, I expect something impressive and I expect customizable emails to know that they do want me to speak at this organization or this university, not they're just looking for 100 people. So because of that, you can't apply to 150 jobs. You have to pick 10 jobs that you really like. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do more than 99% of people would do for this role. 99% are clicking a button and then disappearing and not doing anything. You could do more by just following up, maybe calling the company. Hey, David, I'm sure you don't get a lot of these calls, but I applied for one of your positions. I'd love to talk to the hiring manager. Is he or she available? Is it Frank? I'd love to talk to him for 5 minutes. Just introduce myself so he knows who I am. Again, 50% of the time they'll say, no, David, please apply online. We'll let you know. Other 50% of the time they'll say, here's his email address. So here's, she'll get back to you, leave us. That's okay. You're still doing more than the average. If it's something you're doing in person, just go in person and talk to them, follow up. Hey, Susan, are you the store manager? I see that you guys are hiring. I sent an application online. I haven't heard back. It's been about 3 days. I would love to interview for this role. I've brought my resume. Can we sit down and meet for 5 or 10 minutes? This is how I got my college positions. Long time ago, I was like a cashier or something at a Rite Aid, and I moved to go to college. And I walked into the store that was right next to the college. It was a Rite Aid. And I walked in and I said, hey, who's the general manager of the store? She came out. She said, it's me. What's going on? I said, hey, I work for this store. I'm interested in moving. Here's the reasons why, but I want a supervisor position. Is there one available? She was like, this is unique. Can I call your store manager? I said, happy to. Here's his name, his phone number. 10 minutes later, she comes out and said, I would love to meet you for a final interview. And I was hired. It was a transfer, much easier, but still most people would have looked into it, seen what's online. I just went up to the person and just talked to them. So these are little things no one's doing.
Right.
No one sends postcards.
Mm-hmm.
You send a postcard, you're gonna stand out. Weird, right? No one sends.
It's interesting to hear.
Thank you notes.
It's interesting to hear for sure. Are there any telltale signs of a strong candidate? You mentioned that, but I guess rather I'll ask about like the red flags in a resume. Is there anything you're like, oh, that's maybe not the best fit, not necessarily for your company, but just in general?
I don't like resumes that have people job hopping a lot. It says a little bit about someone's character. Now, again, this early in your career, it's a little difficult to judge that, right? Like how many positions are you going to have had where I'm going to judge your jumpiness, right? But if you've been working for 4 years and you have 6 jobs, I want to know why, right? So in a resume, I would put part-time temporary position. right? Companies shut down store. There has to be a story why. If you keep leaving jobs because, oh, I got bored, oh, this company offered me more money, oh, this was closer to home, or this was too far, I'm thinking about your judgment. Well, if it was too far, why did you take that position? You know, if it didn't pay enough, why did you take that position? Oh, so you quit a job after 3 months, even though they took a shot, you know, gave you an opportunity others wouldn't. 3 months later, the minute you got more money, you just left. Well, most likely that pattern is gonna continue, right? So you're gonna work for me for 3 to 4 months until you find something that pays more. So these are the things. I don't necessarily judge on a resume. What I do is I want to know the story. If you don't have a college degree, I want to know why. Not because I'm judging or my jobs absolutely require a bachelor's degree. I want to know why you chose a different route. And if it's a good reason, I'm all for it. Some of the most intelligent people I've ever met don't even have college degrees, right? So red flag for me is someone that jumps around a lot, especially once you become a professional. Right now, look, you might have seasonal jobs, you'd be moving around. I was in high school, I took this first job, it was only 6 months, I went and got a better job. Great. Then what happened? Why did you quit that job? Well, I went off to UC Berkeley to, go to college. Obviously I needed a job, so I took a new job there. Then what happened? Well, I came back home for the summer, so I needed internships, so I took. That's okay, but it's something that I do immediately notice. So tell me the story on the resume as much as you can without me having to worry or for it to become a concern, right? Those are red flags. Anything belittling a job or talking smack about a former employer or former manager is a big red flag. Obviously, resumes rarely have that, but during an interview, I would never talk badly of colleagues or companies or managers, right? Everything should be looked at as an opportunity.
That's really helpful. And another audience question, you mentioned a little bit, what's the best way to approach salary, especially as a high school student who may not have as much, I don't want to say presence, but who may not be in the same position of power as the interviewer?
Look, again, you got to decide, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to pay bills and you're in a survival mode, right? If you're surviving, you need every dollar to pay your bills. It's a different approach. If you're just looking for an opportunity, these days everyone's paying very well because there's such a shortage in talent. So I don't think compensation should even be a topic to your first couple of jobs, to be honest with you. If someone asks what you're looking to earn, maybe turn it around. Hey, listen, I'm really just looking to get my first great job. I'm really interested in your company. What are you targeting to pay for this position? Typically, employers will tell you directly, hey, Stephen, we're, right now, the most we can do is minimum wage to start. Well, minimum wage is $16 an hour now. So it's not bad, right? So maybe that's where you start. Hey, is there opportunities for advancement if I do extremely well? Yes, within a short, within a reasonable time frame, David, if you do really well, absolutely, we can revisit your salary in 3 to 6 months. But I would not focus on salary right now. Again, as you get more and more seasoned and more professional, then you could ask that question. Sometimes it's in the job posting, sometimes it's not. You could ask it during the interview. David, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm highly interested in this position. A couple quick questions, and maybe have 2 or 3 questions, and maybe the salaries at the bottom or the medium. It shouldn't just be all about the salary. But don't be afraid to negotiate within reason.
Got it. That's actually very interesting. It's good to know. And then you mentioned just one page for people around our age. Any other formatting tips that you like to see? I know you might be a little more picky about it because you are in technology and it's a lot of aspects and stuff like that.
Keep it simple. Make it really, really simple. If you could make it presentable and I could get to know you on a resume, that's better. And I would really do my best to make your contact information stand out. If you have a really professional picture, you're welcome to do that. Maybe a link to a LinkedIn or a link to a really professional project that you've done, a portfolio or something like that, you're welcome to do that. Make sure your Facebook is somewhat presentable, right? Because if an employer wants to see your character and every picture you're doing keg stands, they might get the wrong image, right? And so again, you don't want to change. You want to be who you are, but within reason, right? You gotta, your social status is all over the web, so people are going to be looking for that to see kind of who are they dealing with.
And how much of a role does the internet play? I actually hadn't really thought about that. Does it make a difference? I mean, obviously there are some exceptions, but is there a lot of judgment based off Instagram posts or Twitter comments? Obviously, again, there's exceptions. If you say something really very, very, very bad, then there's a negative. But
you know, it's tough. It's tough to think from holistically, right? Because again, when we're dealing with companies that are hiring executives, it's rarely comes up. Typically, LinkedIn is that, right?
Yeah.
LinkedIn is that. And I don't think you should shield yourself from being yourself on social networks just because you're afraid of being judged. That's not what I was referring to. But you can't be crazy, right? You can't be unreasonable, knowing that someone might be curious who you are, right? Like, let me see who David is. You know, we don't usually hire 19-year-olds, let's say. Let me see who he is. Oh, wow, every picture is of him, you know, smoking a joint. Wow, okay. It's not judging him, but that's not really someone that right now I need in my company. And it's not even judging what that person does on their own time. It's more about the judgment of them putting this out in the open internet. That's more really what it's geared. You know?
That makes sense. And then coming to internships, this is what Project Talent Launch does, what we focus on. How can internships play an impactful role in distinguishing yourself as a candidate or in the job finding process in general?
I think it's brilliant. You know, I never had an opportunity to do internships. I was working during college, and then when I graduated college, people recommended internships, and you know, I had bills, and I had a life, I had an apartment, and I had a job. So I had the luxury of having a job and a decent resume coming out of college. So I didn't necessarily need it. And two, I just didn't have the luxury of just working for free, just because. What I focus on is just finding another, career. But for you all, I would recommend it if you can do it, because one, it builds your resume. That's huge, right? Because a lot of times, what are you going to put on there that you were a student? You know, what could you actually put on a resume if you've never had a job, or you had a job that's completely irrelevant? Like, I worked at Six Flags at my first job. It's almost irrelevant, right? I was a ride operator. I don't know how that could be spun into something relevant, except I had to cut my hair, look presentable, and I went to work on time. So what I would really, really focus on is it gives you an opportunity to build up your resume, one. Two, you learn. That's huge, right? You're actually learning a professional environment. What's normal, what's not normal. You know, people show up to their first day and they're dressed very casual because the world has become casual. I don't think you've earned that right to be casual yet. So I would dress decent. So you learn how to talk to people and not to talk to people. Those are huge from a learning perspective and building up your resume. But I think a hidden great opportunity gives you an opportunity to stay and get a full-time job with that company, right? So we recently did a booth at a university, Cal Lutheran, and people were coming up and they were saying, "Hey, I want to be a marketing professional. Do you have marketing positions? I'd like to start as a marketing intern." For me, immediately I thought, what a great opportunity to allow someone to gain some experience, us get some basically work, and it's basically a working interview. Whether that's a paid internship or unpaid depends on the status of their college and what they need. But it gives us an opportunity to get a really smart person to do work for us for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And for that person, what a great opportunity to see. One, do I want to work at HIRECLOUT? Two, do I get to work at HIRECLOUT? And who has a better foot in the door than that individual who's already doing the work, right? If that person's impressive and I continue to need their efforts, why wouldn't I hire them versus posting a job, interviewing hundreds of people and starting all over? How easy would it be to just hire David, who was our marketing intern, to become a marketing associate with us right after a 3 to 6 month internship? So that's the biggest win from an internship, I think.
And have you had are there any particular positive stories that you have about interns? That's another question someone asked. About internships that were positive in your experience?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, I unfortunately have not done internships, so it's tough for me to imagine it. But for HireClout, we've hired college interns to become full-time recruiters and other positions. It's kind of a no-brainer for me if you find the right individual who's actually looking to expand, within that sector, within that world. Like we had, a couple of years ago, we had 2 or 3 people come on board. They did the internship, and one of them stayed on and worked for us for a long time and grew a really good career with us. Eventually moved to a different country, but he now is still doing that type of work. What a great opportunity. We would not have hired that person otherwise, by the way, because again, these were not recruiters. These are college graduates who said, hey, we want an internship opportunity in this field. Do you have that opportunity? Sure.
That's really inspirational. And then I think we'll end this evening on a personal question. Why did you start HireClout? And if you can give a quick summary of your journey as an entrepreneur. I feel like a lot of people say they want to be entrepreneurs or they want to take that path, but I don't think a lot of people understand the hard work and the grit that it really takes. So if you can just give us a quick, like a blurb about your experience and your journey.
David, it seems like you do already know what it takes, which is impressive. It takes a lot of hard work and grit and sacrifice. That's a third one I would throw in there. The biggest one is the sacrifice. I think a lot of folks want to win in a big way, but they're unwilling to sacrifice. You tell me you want to be an entrepreneur and highly successful, and then you ask me about work hours or work-life balance. I call bullshit, right? Because you're interested in work-life balance. You're not interested in excelling. So, okay, my journey, like all of you, I was a high school kid. I got a job. I wanted to make some money. I wanted to get some experience. I took that, learned, it was over. I wanted a slightly better job. Then I went and applied for a job at Rite Aid. I got the job. I learned. I got transferred. I learned. I was constantly trying to learn and get better. So my success started at 17, 18 years old when I wasn't interested in just clocking in and out. I was interested in learning and getting better and doing a really quality job. For what reason? To grow and to learn. And so like I would get silly little promotions and a 50-cent raise, and to me, it wasn't about the money. It was learning and trying new things and things like that. And then eventually I became a supervisor. Next thing you know, I'm a 19-year-old helping run a $5 million business. There's a lot of things you learn about managing people and managing a business when you're in that position. Other friends worked at supermarkets, which nothing wrong with that, being just what's the smallest job I can do so I can, go back to school and focus on all that stuff or party or whatever. Or they were, they worked at restaurants. Again, nothing wrong with it. But my approach wasn't just to make ends meet, but learn while I'm there, and then I started over. I was a coach at a after school program, right? So then I became a head coach, then I became a training coach, and then I became a traveling program manager when I managed 17 schools and all the sports programs there. Again, each opportunity gave me, all I did is work, and I didn't focus on the money necessarily. I just wanted to have a good time and actually work and learn. And so my recommendation to young people all the time is, you're already there, you might as well do a really good job. Like a lot of times people are just like, I work at Home Depot, I gotta go truck do this for the next 8 hours, shitty job. No, man, don't. You're there 8 hours. You might as well make the best of it. Have some fun. Talk to customers, learn something, learn about products. Now, look, if you work at a terrible organization, you should use that experience and move on, right? But if you're at a decent place that are treating you well, just do a good job. Do your best and you'll grow. So when I left, LAUSD was a phenomenal organization. I learned a lot, but then I realized, look, I have a business degree. I have a double degree in business. And although I'm applying my management skills, I'm in a sports program, right? Where is the furthest I can go in this organization? And what I realized is I couldn't go too much further up. And I didn't want to spend the next 10, 20 years there working my way up. So then I moved on to an organization called Kaplan. Talk about hard work. I went from being some important guy, managing so many different people, to becoming an assistant director in a small store, working 11 to 9. The thing about working 11 to 9 is you can't do anything before and you can't do anything after. So all I did is work, and my win was when I got promoted to the next position is I'm leaving at 7:30, which was good enough for me to go and at least have dinner with my friends or, go date or whatever I was doing, right? So these are the small wins along the way. And then I became a senior director of this organization called Kaplan, right? Where I had a whole division, lots of employees, and I loved it. I learned a lot, and I realized, I'm not a corporate guy. The red tape and the layers and layers of management are going to drive me crazy. And it doesn't matter how well I do, if the company's not growing, I'm not going to grow. So I decided to go into an organization that needed to be rebuilt from scratch. It had good bones, but it was kind of, on the ropes a little bit. It had gone through 2 recessions and wasn't doing well. Most people would have gone to a bigger company with a big office, double the salary. I went the other way. I took a risk. I went backwards. I went into an entrepreneurial environment that wasn't mine. Eventually, I became an owner in that company, along with my partner who had hired me. And then eventually we started HIRECLOUT together, right? And because I did have the itch to go do my own thing, and I wanted for it to be my baby. But here was a guy that was, I had worked with for years. I respected, he respected me. We grew together rather than becoming competitors. He said, let's go start your dream company together. And so we started HIRECLOUT together. We've expanded HIRECLOUT together. We're extremely different. And so he learns from me, I learn from him. I'm the visionary and step on the gas person. He's our cool, calm, older, more kind of relaxed and, accounting and finance and legal person. So he keeps us kind of grounded in that. I want to grow nonstop. He balances that out with, hey, can we look at a budget? Do we really need 5 people? Can we hire 4? So long, boring story short, here we are again. And then now I've hired someone who's grown with us for 5, 6 years. He's becoming a managing partner and he's becoming an entrepreneur. Another advice I would give to people is don't just obsess over becoming an entrepreneur, because you might not have the assets, the financial prowess to do it, but you could become an entrepreneur and do that within your own company with all the support you have. You could take over a division. You could have a piece of that company's equity if you put in enough time and effort and sweat equity, right? But the biggest thing I would recommend is be ready to hustle. David nailed it: grit and motivation, and financial, mental, and physical staying power. If you think you're gonna get off the ground and kill it, good luck with that, right? Expect to struggle, expect to be frustrated, expect to be tempted to go back to the corporate world. But if your dream is there, keep following it. Now you might have to pivot, you might have to go back and get a job and then come back. But these are all the things I would expect as an entrepreneur: is be ready for the grind.
Yeah, that's really inspirational. And then if we have any audience questions from Stephen or Ali, I answered the ones from people who couldn't make it today. But if anybody has any last final questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So one thing I just like to ask people in the recruiting world, especially now, is what changes have you seen in the past 2 years? There's definitely been a lot, but what has stood out to you in the whole market itself?
The last 2 years, you said, Stephen?
Yeah, with COVID and everything.
COVID completely changed the world, I think. And I think tech changed the world. It's obviously been doing that for years anyway, but I think what's happened is it's completely changed this location remote model, right? So historically, what companies did is they hired people in their city and they competed within their city and within their region. What's changed is the world has changed completely. And if you're in any role that's got a digital component, you don't have to be necessarily in an office. That being said, for young people, I highly recommend being in an office. For anybody, I highly recommend at least being in a hybrid model, because no matter how much you like working remotely, there's things you're missing out on. You're missing out on a social aspect of working in a group setting. You're missing out on opportunities to be mentored, to mentor others, to learn, to be groomed. I have people all over the globe, and most of them are remote, and they're amazing. But the people in our LA office, our headquarters, obviously get more time with us. They get more training and development opportunities. They get more in the kind of moment training and mentorship and tips and things like that, which then allows them to grow. right? And so, and they're here. So guess who's going to get the information first, and who's going to get the one-on-one in the conference room training or speech versus something I have to put together an email or some Zoom meeting I have to set up. So I don't know if I quite answered that, Stephen, but what it's done is it's given you all a lot more opportunities. So it's become a candidate market. You have way more choices. You have 10 times more choices than before, because you're no longer saying, okay, David, I live in Arcadia. What is within a 10-mile radius of me that'd be willing to work? Maybe if it's a retail job. Potentially you have more opportunities as you get a little bit older to work for a company. Maybe that's not in Arcadia. Maybe it's not even in Pasadena. Maybe it's in Burbank, or it's in Woodland Hills, but you only have to go in 4 days a week or 3 days a week, or there's flexible hours. And so things definitely change from that perspective. Things have become more digital. I expect it to crawl back a little bit, but it's definitely changed. I think COVID has changed everything, and some things for good, and some things temporarily.
Awesome. Any last questions from anybody? Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know, is it more stressful when you have an internship versus like a regular job when you're in school?
So was that Ali? It was Ali, right?
That was Ali, yeah.
Ali, the question was, is it more stressful to be in a internship or a position, in like a regular position?
Is it more like stressful to have an internship along with school rather than like a regular job along with school?
That really depends on the school, the position, and you, right? I don't think there's a blanket answer for this one, Ali, because it depends, right? If it's an internship for your dream job and it's a very complex job, naturally it's going to be more stressful, right? So if you want to be an accountant and you have an accounting internship, of course it's going to be more stressful, if you want to call it that, because at the end of the day, guess what you're doing? You're doing something you've never professionally done. There's pressure because this company is not playing around, right? This is an organization that needs work done, whether it's from senior or junior person. The work still has to be done at a certain quality. Versus Ali, if let's say, excuse the volume, by the way, there's people, or it's almost after hours at HIRECLOUT, so they're having some fun. So if you're going to be working at, let's say, a Costco as a cashier, clearly that's going to be less stressful, right? Because you're doing a regular job that is, a highly intelligent person could do as long as they're trained. So there's maybe less stress, but potentially less learning. Hopefully I was able to answer your question.
Thank you. And anything else? Last call? I know we've already taken a lot of your time, but thank you so much. I really can't thank you enough for being here and for providing your sage advice and knowledge and everything. And I think a lot of people will benefit from just hearing this. And again, I thank you. And from Project Talent Launch, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. It's